Hey there, and welcome to the show. I'm Jack, and I'm joined today by Elena.
Hi, everyone.
So we're going to dive into something today that's a game changer for English learners. It's how to think in English, not just translate in your head.
Yeah, that constant translating can really slow you down when you're trying to speak. It's like there's this mental roadblock.
It really is, and frustrating too.
Yeah.
So how do we break through that roadblock? How do we start thinking in English?
Well, the good news is you can train your brain to think in English just like you train a muscle. And
Hmm.
we can start small, like baby steps. We don't have to change everything at once. Just begin with something easy, like naming things you see around you in English.
Okay, so that sounds manageable. So instead of
Yeah.
thinking table in my native language, I'd think table in English.
Yeah, exactly. You're making a direct connection between what you see and the English word. And you can practice this anywhere, anytime, cooking, walking down the street, even at home.
So it's about making English part of my everyday life, even in small ways.
Yes, and once you're comfortable with naming things, you can take it up a notch. Try creating word pictures in your mind, for example. Imagine a box of tissues.
Okay, got it.
Now think of all the words that come to mind when you see that box, not just translating the word tissues, but think about the color, shape, texture. Maybe even when you'd use them like soft, white, rectangular, colds, even allergies.
That's interesting. It's like building up a whole web of associations around a word makes it easier to remember, I guess.
Right, and the more you do this, the easier it becomes to think of those words in English.
So what about learning new words? Any tricks to make them stick?
One thing that helps is creating a mental snapshot of where you first learned a word. So was it in a song, in a book? Did a friend say it?
Using context to remember, kind of.
Exactly. It's like a mental file for that word. And when you see it again, you can access that file and remember how it was used.
Okay, so we've talked about single words. How do we start thinking in whole sentences?
Well, it's a gradual process. You start by combining those single words into simple sentences. So use those word pictures you've been making. For example, I see a white rectangular box of tissues.
And saying it out loud helps, right? Even if I'm just talking to myself.
Absolutely. Saying it out loud or even recording yourself reinforces those connections in your brain. It's like giving your brain a workout.
No need to be afraid of making mistakes either, right?
Exactly. Everyone makes mistakes. It's
Yeah.
part of learning. The important thing is to keep practicing and challenging yourself with more complex sentences as you go.
Okay, so we're building up to sentences, but how do we get to that point where thinking and speaking English feels natural, like in real life situations?
And that brings us to the golden rule of language learning practice, practice, practice. You have to actually use the language in real conversations.
Makes sense. You can know all the grammar and vocabulary, but if you don't
Yeah.
use it, you lose it.
Right. And there are so many ways to practice. You can talk with English-speaking friends, join an online language group, even talk to your pet in English.
Wait, talk to my pet in English.
Sure, why not? They're great listeners, and the goal is to get comfortable speaking English out loud without worrying too much about mistakes.
I don't think my dog will mind my pronunciation. So we can talk to pets. What else?
There's also a technique called shadowing. Basically, you listen to a native speaker and immediately repeat what they say.
So, like, I'm a vocal copycat.
You got it. Start with simple sentences from songs or movies you enjoy. It'll train your brain to hear and then copy the natural rhythm and intonation of English.
So that's actively practicing
Ugh.
speaking. What about making English a bigger part of my life, even when I'm not studying?
Great point. One simple but surprisingly effective trick is to change the language settings on your phone and computer to English.
That's a good idea. It's like
Right.
I'm surrounded by the language, even in small ways.
Exactly, and you'll be surprised how quickly you pick up new words and phrases just from seeing them every day.
Like passive learning throughout the day.
Right. Another good way to make English a habit is to read for fun in English. Choose books, magazines, websites that you're actually interested in, and commit to reading a little each day.
I like that because it doesn't feel like studying if I'm enjoying what I'm reading.
Precisely. And even small things like writing your to-do list or journaling in English make a difference over time.
So it's about finding ways to fit English into my daily routine, even if it's just for a few minutes here and there.
Exactly. The more you expose yourself to the language, the more natural it will feel to think in English.
Now, all this talk about making English a habit makes me wonder, are there things we can do to specifically train our brains to be better at thinking in English?
There are. Our brains are amazingly adaptable, and just like we train our bodies to be stronger and faster, we can train our brains to learn languages more efficiently.
How do we give our brain that English workout then?
One key is to keep learning new things in general. It could be a new skill, a hobby, a musical instrument. Anything that challenges your brain keeps it active.
So it's not just about English, it's about keeping my mind sharp overall.
Exactly. And music itself can be a powerful tool for language learning. Think about how kids learn the alphabet through songs. You can do the same thing with English vocabulary and phrases.
So listening to English music or even singing along can help me learn.
Definitely, music helps us remember things, and it makes learning more fun.
I'm all for making learning fun. Are there any other brain-boosting activities for English?
Absolutely. Laughter and socializing are both great for our brains. Laughter releases those feel-good chemicals and can help us learn more effectively. And socializing keeps our minds engaged and sharp.
So if I watch a funny English language movie or chat with friends in English, it's like a win-win.
Exactly. You're having fun and learning at the same time.
Sounds good to me.
Ah.
But with all this mental exercise, we need to remember something important: rest.
You're right. It can't be all go, go, go. Our brains need time to process, and that's where rest comes in.
So getting enough sleep is important for language learning too.
Absolutely. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep every night. It helps solidify those memories and improves how well your brain works.
I can get behind a good night's sleep. Any other tips for the rest and recharge part of this?
Taking a few minutes each day to reflect on your day in English can be really helpful. So think about what you did, what you learned, how you felt. Even 5 minutes helps make those language skills stronger.
Like a mental review session.
Exactly. And don't forget to track your progress. Notice those small wins, like using a new word in conversation or understanding a little more of that English movie. It's really motivating.
It's like seeing the results of all that mental exercise. It keeps you going.
It really does. It shows you that all that effort is paying off.
All of this is really helpful, but it can also feel overwhelming. Where do I even begin if I want to start thinking in English?
You're right, it can seem like a lot, especially at first. The key is you don't have to do everything at once. Just pick 1 or 2 things that really resonate with you from this episode and try to make them a part of your routine.
Yeah, I like that. It's about making small changes that you can stick with, not trying to become fluent overnight.
Exactly. Even little things like switching your phone to English or taking 5 minutes before bed to just think about your day in English can make a difference over time. Those small things really add up.
I remember when I first started learning English, I was so focused on grammar rules and vocabulary lists. It felt like I was always translating in my head.
That's a really common experience. A lot of us are taught languages in a way that focuses on the technical stuff instead of the natural flow of communication.
It's true. But when I started trying out some of these tips, like talking to myself in English and shadowing native speakers, I really noticed a change.
Yeah, it's like you're teaching your brain to skip that translation step and just think directly in English.
It made speaking English a lot easier and more enjoyable, too.
Yeah.
It felt less like work and more like a natural way to express myself.
That's the goal, right? To get to a point where using English feels natural, like a part of you, not another language you have to translate.
It really is. It's like unlocking a whole new level of fluency and confidence.
And the best part is anyone can do it. It just takes time, effort, and trying new things.
Speaking of trying new things, I remember reading about something called the memory palace. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah, the memory palace. It's a really cool technique for memorizing new words.
Hmm.
Basically, you imagine a familiar place like your home, and you link new information to specific locations within that place.
So like if I wanted to learn a list of English verbs, I could picture myself walking through my house and putting each verb in a different room.
Exactly. You could see yourself placing the verb to eat in the kitchen, to sleep in the bedroom, and so on. And the weirder and more vivid the image, the better.
That sounds way more fun than just staring at flashcards.
It is. And it works because it uses our natural ability to remember places. We're really good at remembering locations and how things are laid out.
That's true. I can still remember the layout of places I visited years ago. So if we connect new vocabulary to those familiar places, we're kind of using that same skill.
Exactly. It's like making a mental map for your new words, and visualizing them in those specific spots makes them easier to remember.
Like giving your brain a filing system. I love it. I'm definitely trying that.
I think you should. It's a fun and effective way to remember more vocabulary. And there's tons of information online if you want to learn more about how to use it.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of great tips for thinking in English, from starting small with naming things to techniques like the memory palace for building vocabulary. But I want to go back to something we talked about before, the importance of real-life practice.
It's so important. You can spend all day studying, but if you're not using the language in real situations, it's not going to stick.
I totally agree. It's like learning to play piano.
Yeah,
You can read all the theory, but you have to actually sit down and play to get good at it.
exactly. Same goes for language learning. You have to get out there and use it in real conversations. even if it feels a bit scary or awkward at first.
So how do we get over that fear of making mistakes and just start speaking?
Well, one thing you can do is find a language partner or a group where you feel comfortable making mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning. It's totally normal.
And most people are pretty understanding and patient when they know you're still learning.
They are. In fact, many people are impressed when someone is putting in the effort to learn their language.
That's true. I've found that people are generally happy to help and encourage me when they see that I'm really trying to communicate.
It's about finding those safe spaces where you can practice without judgment. And the more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
And the more you practice, the more those conversations will just start to flow without having to translate everything in your head.
Exactly. Like building a muscle, the more you use it, the stronger it gets. And eventually, thinking and speaking English will feel like second nature.
So for everyone out there who wants to be able to think in English fluently, what's one piece of advice to get started today?
Choose one small thing from this episode that you can start doing today. It could be naming things around you listening to an English song, or taking a few minutes to think about your day in English. Just make it a habit, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
That's great advice. Elena, small steps can really make a big difference, and especially when you start to see those small successes, it keeps you motivated to keep going.
Yeah, it's true. Success breeds success, as they say.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing that's really important when you're learning a new language, and that's mindset.
Absolutely. Your mindset plays a huge role in how successful you'll be.
I think a lot of people, they get discouraged when they don't see results right away, or if they make mistakes, they start to doubt themselves like, will I ever be able to think in English?
It's so important to be patient with yourself. Remember language learning. It's a journey, not a race.
Some days you'll feel like you're making progress, other days you might feel stuck, but the key is to just keep going.
And to celebrate those small victories along the way, every time you use a new word or phrase, or you understand a little more of a movie, or even catch yourself thinking in English for a few seconds, acknowledge those moments.
Because those little wins, they show you that you're moving in the right direction and they help you build confidence and stay motivated.
Exactly. And remember, learning a new language, it opens up a whole world of possibilities. You can connect with new people, new cultures, you can expand your horizons.
It's like a superpower.
It is.
So for all our listeners who are on this journey of learning English and trying to train their brains to think in this new language, we're cheering you on every step of the way.
Keep practicing, keep experimenting with these tips, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself.
And remember all the amazing things that are waiting for you when you become fluent. The ability to connect with people from all over the world, understand different cultures, express yourself in new ways. It's all within your reach.
That's a great way to put it, Jack. Just remember, everyone learning a new language has challenges. Just be patient, celebrate your progress, and don't give up on your goals.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of thinking in English. Until next time, keep learning and keep exploring.